Hello and welcome to Afternoon Tea with Karen. I have something special from Sophia and I'm going to catch up with how Tom's going in Albany. I'm going to watch this guy shake with fear or humiliation. And we're going to watch the guy in the pink, blue and white because he's funny.
The Honourable Sophia Moermond.
Thank you, Acting Chair. Yesterday it was mentioned that trans-identified people were consulted in the drafting of this legislation. Who else has been consulted?
The Parliamentary Secretary.
Deputy Chair, and please excuse me while I turn my back to you, for the members' benefit. So I did go through a list of those yesterday. So there were the government entities that were consulted, which included the Register of Births, Deaths and Marriages, the Family Court of Western Australia, the Gender Reassignment Board, the Department of Communities, Department of Health, the Public Advocate, the State Administrative Tribunal, the Department of Justice Corrective Services, the WA Police Force, the Prisoners Review Board, Supervised Release Review Board, the Commissioner for Victims of Crime, the Commissioner for Equal Opportunity and the State Solicitor's Office. And then briefings were also provided to stakeholders representing the LGBTIQA+ community. And so this included, and you mentioned, I think you described them as trans-identified people. So this group is broader than just that. So it's Rainbow Futures, Living Proud, Trans Folk of WA, Grey, Ending Conversion Practices and Equality Australia. I'll also note that there was, and we do have available to us to go through the list that the Law Reform Commission consulted with or received submissions from, which is quite an exhaustive list and is actually contained within the report itself. So it's a public, it's already in the public sphere as to who the Law Reform Commission went through, and I'm conscious of the short time we've got, so unless you require me to, I'd prefer not to have to read all that out for the record.
That's fine.
The Honourable
Thank
Sophia
you,
Moermond.
Parliamentary Secretary. If I understand it correctly, though, parents with rapid onset gender dysphoria children were not consulted, women's organisations weren't consulted, trans widows weren't consulted, and detransitioners weren't consulted.
Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. Member, what I said to you, that briefings were provided to those organisations, and the consultations in terms of the construction of the bill were with that longer list of what are effectively government entities in terms of developing the bill. The government relied on the work of the Law Reform Commission in Project 108, and the work that they did and the engagement they did. Of course, we didn't adopt all the recommendations of those, but in terms of the drafting of the bill itself, that was largely an internal process, and then subsequently briefings were then provided to, and people could have requested briefings directly from the Attorney's Office had they wanted to do that. I don't think it was offered as a, there wasn't advertised in the paper or anything like that, but groups that were engaged with the process did seek to be briefed on what we proposed to do.
The Honourable Sophia Moermond.
Thank you, Chair. Is the committee aware that cognitive and physical maturity is reached at age 25? At that age, most people have desisted, by the way, about 80%. So I am curious to know how you came to the age of 18.
Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. So, Member, 18 is currently the age for application that someone becomes eligible to make their own application without to the Gender Reassignment Board in their own right. So we're continuing to reflect 18 for that application. I might add 18 is contested, not in your sense is contested from, you say it should be higher, others say it should be lower as well, and the government stuck with the age at which people reach the age of majority, which is 18 in this state. They're entitled to the full benefits of being an adult and all the responsibilities that come with that. So that's essentially where we're at. It wasn't something that so there's obviously other provisions in the bill that relate to entitlements associated with children at different points in time. You haven't asked that question, and if you do, I've got stuff I can tell you about it.
The Honourable Sophia Moermond.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. One term that has been repeatedly used by the committee here is that sex is assigned at birth. That is not a medical term as far as I know. So sex is observed at birth. Is there a reason why you've gone with sex being assigned at birth?
The Parliamentary Secretary.
Chair, sorry. Jess. Member, the use of that term by us is not reflective of it being a technical term in that regard. It reflects the process that happens. So, as you quite rightly point out, at the time of birth, the sex is observed by the responsible person, whether that's the midwife or some other person who has a responsibility to do that, and then is assigned by way of the completion of the particular form. So it's really a description of the process more than anything else. It's not a technical description or a legal definition in that particular regard.
The Honourable Sophia Moermond.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. Thank you for that explanation. I do believe that the term assigned a birth or assigned a sex at birth is misleading for people out there and is causing confusion around sex being immutable, basically. I also have some questions, though, in regards to how women and girls might be affected by this. So, say if a woman is in need of medical care or a procedure like a pap smear, and a man with a gender recognition certificate or similar adjusted birth certificate walks in as a medical practitioner, does that woman have the right to say no to that person touching her body?
Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Deputy Chair, and again, apologies for turning my back to you, but this is for the member. So, member, a person always has the right to refuse medical interventions and care. So, in the particular instance, yes, they can refuse medical care because it's about their bodily autonomy.
Thank you. Would the same apply, say, to a female police officer where the person that has been arrested is a male who identifies as trans?
Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you. So I've got an answer here, member, which is reasonably long, but I'll try and get through it as quickly as I can. So your question was whether a female police officer can refuse to search a person who identifies as female and has requested a search by a female officer. So under Section 22 of the Criminal Investigation Act, where the gender of a person is relevant to search procedures and a police officer is uncertain as to the gender of the person to be searched, A, the officer must ask the person to indicate whether a male or a female should exercise the power on the person and must act in accordance with the answer. And B, in the absence of an answer, the person must be treated as if of the gender that the person outwardly appears to the officer to be. The WA Police Force policy and procedure is in line with this legislation, being that one, basic search where practicable must only be done by a person of the same gender as the person to be searched, unless the searcher is a doctor or a nurse. 2, in relation to a strip search, the searcher must be the same gender as the person being searched, unless the searcher is a doctor or a nurse, and any person present while it is done must, if practicable, be of the same gender as the person being searched. While the Criminal Investigation Act refers to gender, this is interpreted as a reference to the person's sex. The practical effect of this is that if a person outwardly appears to be of the male sex but states that they identify as being of the female gender, and that therefore a female police officer should search them, then the female police officer should ask the person whether they have female or male sex characteristics and determine on that basis whether to search the person or not. If the person responds that they have male sex characteristics, then the female police officer can and should refuse to search the person, as doing otherwise would be in breach of the Criminal Investigation Act. If there is some uncertainty as to whether the person is of the male or female sex, then the police officer must deal with the person according to their outward appearance. The Criminal Investigation Act does not allow for a person to choose whether a male or female police officer searches them. Situations may arise where a person is in the process of reassignment and therefore has female sex characteristics on their upper body but male sex characteristics on their lower body. In this scenario, a female officer would search the upper part of the person's body, then hand that clothing back to the person before leaving the room so that a male officer can conduct the search of the lower part of the person.
What about the rights of female prisoners? There have been several cases now where a convicted male sex offender who then chooses to identify as female has been housed with female prisoners and has raped them. Are there rights for the female prisoner to say no to this?
Sorry, Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. So, Member, the circumstances you've described in terms of somebody being raped hasn't happened in a West Australian prison, or there hasn't been a reported case of it. So, what you must be referring to has happened in other jurisdictions. But the circumstances where a person who is transsexual or gender diverse is a matter that the corrective services, the prison authorities do deal with that in WA. So when a prisoner, what I'll do is I'll describe to you about the process that happens. So when a prisoner arrives at the prison, prison officers check the identity of the prisoner, and the prisoner's gender is determined by the gender indicated on the warrant or other instrument authorising imprisonment. Where a person identifies as trans, gender diverse or intersex, the prisoner may be accommodated in a single cell or a special purpose cell, segregated from the prison population with separate ablution facilities until a placement decision is made. Corrective Services has a specific Commissioner's operating policy and procedure, which is called COP, which is the name of the document, which outlines the operating procedures for the placement of trans, gender diverse and intersex prisoners. As directed by the guiding principles for corrections in Australia, prisoner classification and placement are based on an objective assessment of prisoners' security risk, rehabilitation and reintegration needs. Prisoners are assessed and allocated to accommodation compatible with their assessed risks and needs to ensure their safety and security and the good order of the facility.
Now to Albany, to someone who is not shaking with fear. City of Albany orders WA Liberal candidate Thomas Brough to take training after LGBTQIA+ comments. He was ordered to take workplace training with the Australian Human Rights Commission and directed by the City of Albany to undergo respectful and inclusive workplace training after complaints following his comments at council meeting during Pride Week in February. But he said no. Thomas Brough refuses to undergo council-ordered inclusivity training. The embattled City of Albany councillor says the training provided by the Australian Human Rights Commission is akin to conversion therapy and forced indoctrination. Councillor Brough, who is an emergency department doctor, was selected to be the Liberal Party's candidate for Albany at the 2025 state election. Under their rebranding, he's now known as Tom Brough. I think you're already known as Tom when your name's Thomas. That's like Tim and Timothy and John and Jonathan. Anyway, is in the public domain that council decided that their ratepayers should foot the bill for a uniquely un-Australian punishment by forced re-education by government bureaucracy, conversion therapy, or at least on the cusp of it, he said. Let me be clear, I will not comply. Let me be clear, I will defy you. Good. The Liberals are not Labor light in Western Australia. Tigerbird from Albany Pride said the aspiring politician was looking desperate. And this is Tigerbird. See you later. Bye.